Cool. Very good. And I think that is our guest. So I will start with the intro. This presentation will include the duties of the secretary before, during, and after meetings. These duties include items to assist the chair with items that the secretary should bring to every meeting, formatting, reading, and correcting the minutes. We will cover tips on writing good minutes, how to record votes, and what should and should not be in the body of the minutes, and how to preserve the minutes. This will also be an example of how to write the minutes. Christina is currently serving as the Vice President of the Registered Parliamentarians Unit of Illinois, Wisconsin, State, and the Madison Unit. And on the national level, she is serving on the Leadership Workshop Committee and has previously served on the Educational Resources Committee. We are thrilled to welcome Christina Emmert to talk about the duties of the Secretary. Christina, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm excited to join all of you and meet all of you. With that, I will share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
We will fix that.
Yep. I know I usually try to set my Zooms up so everybody can share, and for some reason it keeps reverting back to not letting everybody share. I was on a meeting last night where we had to keep changing it.
All right, you should be able to share now.
Let me try one more time. It is not letting me. Yeah, it's still giving me the disabled screen sharing.
You're set up as a co-host.
How weird.
Let me see something here.
No, I don't see her as a co-host.
I don't.
No, you're a co-host now.
Now I am. Yeah.
Now she is.
Okay, let's give it one more try. Oh, I see a familiar name. Dan Johnson. My New Mexico friend. And let me take it into slideshow mode. Okay. So minutes made easy. Duties of the secretary. So thank you for the nice introduction. I will not introduce myself anymore. That's enough information about me. So duties of the secretary. One of them right away is to send out the call or the notice of the meeting in advance of the meeting. And it also, it always depends on what your rules for your organization say about how far ahead the notice needs to come out and how the meetings are scheduled. Sometimes we have a calendar ahead of time that already says when meetings are, so you may not be sending out regular calls, but it is good to send out a reminder. You want to include the date, the time, and the place of the meeting. And if any member wishes to give previous notice of a motion that they intend to propose at the meeting, they can send it to you, the secretary, beforehand. And then you would include it into that call for the meeting too, so that the group knows what to expect. And Robert says at the group's expense. And nowadays, of course, I don't think we're mailing out very many notices. So most of this would be done by email anymore. So a simple call to meeting example is the annual meeting of the Wisconsin Association of Parliamentarians will be held Saturday, August 27th, 2022 at 10 a.m. in the Fitchburg Public Library. John Smith has given notice at the meeting. He will move to rescind the resolution adopted March 10th, 1999 related to membership dues. So that's a pretty straightforward example of notice, and if somebody gives notice to make a motion at the meeting. And so it went backwards.
Excuse me for stopping you, Christina. AJ, I don't know if you see in the chat, there seems to be a problem with the setting that's preventing Tan from turning on her video. And since everyone has to have their videos on, if you could figure that one out, I would very much appreciate it.
Okay.
Sorry, Christina.
That's okay. Fun with technology, right? It's convenient and inconvenient all at the same time. We all know how that works. So we also want to assist our president with the agenda based on the minutes that a secretary takes at the meeting. You want to send a memorandum to your president so that they know what to put onto the agenda that would list any item that's scheduled to come up, whether it's a motion that wasn't completed at the last meeting or an item that also wasn't addressed at the last meeting. If some kind of committee was supposed to report at this meeting, if there was a postponement, things like that. Anything that you know, according to the last meeting and according to your minutes, you know should come up at this meeting. So you would want to send that memorandum to your president to help them draft their agenda for the meeting. At the meeting, you would like to bring the official membership roll. You want to bring a list of all the existing committees and their members. And also I include in that list of committees, your executive committee, things like that as well. Your bylaws, any special rules of orders you have, and the standing rules. Any recent minutes, of course, because there will be minutes to approve from the previous meeting, and even any recent minutes from that year too, so you can look back to see what was done at a previous meeting. And if the president and vice president both happen to not get on the meeting, it's your job as secretary to call the meeting to order and immediately call for nominations to conduct an election of a temporary chairman. So you as secretary would not be presiding at that meeting, but you would be looking to have somebody else that was in attendance to preside at that meeting instead of the president or vice president. Also, you would read the minutes, any correspondence that you have received, and any resolutions that anybody sent ahead of time to the assembly. You would record motions, of course, that were made, if they were adopted, if they were defeated. You would assist with voting, helping to count, or if there's roll call involved, you would record the roll call votes. And so those are some of the basic duties. We'll go over some of those in more detail as we go on. But why do we need to keep minutes for the organization? Well, these are the official legal record of our organization. If, God forbid, there ever happened to be anything, you get sued or anything like that, you would want to make sure that you had those records of all the business that was taken care of in your organization, all the motions that were passed, things like that. Also, you're not always going to have all your members at a meeting, so you want to be able to send out those minutes and keep members informed of what's going on in your organization. Of course, refresh members' memories. We don't always have the best memories after a meeting. It's usually hard to take notes and keep a good record of everything that happened as a member attending a meeting. So we want to be able to remind members of things that have happened. And then any audits that happen to take place within your organization, minutes are also used for those. So these are really important records to have and to keep organized, and keep handy and accessible.
Christina, I apologize. May I just ask you to pause for another minute?
Absolutely.
Myra is exiting and trying to come back in to see if that cures the video problem.
Okay.
AJ, I don't know what your progress is.
Okay, everybody should be able to turn on the video.
Let's see if that's, okay. And while we're briefly paused, we have two more guests who've arrived, Tom. Okay, well, he may have a problem with his audio. Okay, so I see, so let's see if Myra is able to get her video on. Okay, great. And Kay Cruz, welcome. We're glad to see you this evening. If you are needing your CEUs because you're a member of NAP, would you please do two things? Turn your video on, and second, in the chat, my name is Penelope. You can do a direct chat to me with your NAP number. You don't need CEUs.
I don't need any CEUs. I can't
That's
walk
fine.
out of the house without them landing on my head.
Never mind. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I apologize. And Christina has said to everyone that if you have questions as this progresses, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and to try to convey the questions to her. So again, apologies everyone for that long pause. And now I will return the floor to where it belongs. Christina.
That's okay. That's great. I kind of had to laugh because I'm familiar with Kay, and for her to say she doesn't, I knew she wouldn't need any. If I have enough, I know Kay has enough.
Okay.
So yes, when we're writing our minutes, our first paragraph should contain what kind of meeting it is. Is it a quarterly meeting? Is it our annual meeting? Is it a special meeting? Things like that. The name of the group, the date and the time in which the meeting was held, the location if your meeting place changes. If it's the same all the time, you don't necessarily have to put the location in there, but I tend to do it anyways. Presence of the president and the secretary, or the name of the members who served pro tem president or secretary, meaning of course those temporarily in the position because the president or secretary could not attend that particular meeting. You do not have to put that there was a quorum at the meeting unless the president states it, or of course, you have rules. We always say, look at your rules, see what your rules say as far as if the quorum has to be in your minutes or not. And depending on some public bodies and things like that, they do have to state a quorum. They do have to list members that are present in that. So that's one of those things, which everything I always say, look at your rules and see what your rules say. But Robert says you don't have to put a quorum unless it's stated by your president. Your previous meeting minutes, if they're approved, well, they have to be approved, but that they were approved or approved as corrected. In your body of your minutes, so after your first paragraph, you're going to put a separate paragraph for each subject. And so you may have reports, officer reports, committee reports, special orders, things like that. So a separate paragraph for each subject. The name of the person or the committee that makes the motions. You don't need the seconds unless, again, if your rules have special mention that you have to have the name of whoever seconds the motion. You don't have to put that second in there. Any main motions as they're stated by the chair as they stood when voted on. So you don't necessarily have to write down the main motion, and if it was amended several times, you don't have to keep rewriting the motion. So you want to write the motion in the minutes as it was stated, the way the members vote on it. So you do want to make sure it's clear when the president states the motion that it is in fact the motion that members are voting on, that the president repeated the motion correctly too. The disposition of the motions, like I said, whether they were adopted, whether they were rejected, referred, postponed, things like that, what happened to the motion. You do not want to put your opinions in the minutes when you're putting anything in there. Some people like to write a lot of details in minutes, and a lot of those details don't need to be put in there because of course the minutes are what was done and not what was said. Any secondary motions that are adopted, they might be listed if you need them for clarity. And a lot of times you don't need them. Things like, call the question, things like that, that are really not going to affect the minutes and clarifying what happened at the meeting. Any motions that were withdrawn do not need to be included in the minutes. Any points of order, and if there were appeals on a point of order. So meaning if a member makes a point of order, and the president says the point of order is well taken, that's all that would need to be put in there. Member such and such made a point of order. The president stated the point of order was well taken. Now, if it's the opposite and somebody makes a point of order and the president says your point of order was not well taken, a member can choose to appeal it, and then there is a whole appeal process you would go through. So you would write what the point of order was, that the point of order was not well taken, that the member appealed it, and then what the outcome of the appeal was, whether the delegation or membership voted in favor of sustaining the appeal, meaning going with what the president said, or not sustaining the appeal, going against what the president said.
Excuse me, so do you mean that that what the point of order is not stated?
Yeah, you would put the point of order. So if if somebody said, Madam Chairman, I believe the member was incorrect, or I believe that what you stated was incorrect. Yeah, you would put that in there. And then you would put whether or not, like if a member makes a point of order, you would write what that point of order was. And then you would write whether the chairman found the point of order well taken, meaning they agreed with that member, or whether it was not well taken, meaning they disagreed with the member. But yes, you would write down what the point of order was. Did that clarify that?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any reports that are made. So, we have officers' reports, committee reports, and such. Any motions arising from a committee report does not need a second because committees are usually more than one person. So it's at least two members, making this motion that comes out of a committee report. So you would state it in your minutes. Motion was made by Mr. Smith on behalf of the membership committee. And you would write what the motion was. And if there is no recommendation in a committee report, it would just be noted that the report was given by, in this case, Mr. Smith on behalf of the membership committee. So there's no need to write anything else in there. And then of
And
course,
is the report itself included?
usually organizations tend to attach all the reports when they send out the minutes, and most of the time you get those reports ahead of a meeting too. But yeah, when I put them together in a meeting book, I do put all the reports that come with the minutes with the meeting minutes too, so they can be referenced to later. Oop, I went backwards. I have Kay with her hand up.
Oh, I don't
You
see
do.
that.
And
Sorry.
I didn't ask, are you taking questions and comments during?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. One thing that I would point out that Roberts would tell you is that you don't want to adopt the reports when you adopt your minutes, because if you do so, then you have adopted every single word in every single report and made that the official position and statement of the assembly. So what I tend to do as a best practice is I put a slip sheet, just a colored page, and I do it in Word. And then on that, I write items behind this sheet are attached for reference and are not adopted, so that it's clear that they have not been adopted by the assembly.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that tip, Kay. Yeah, definitely. I know I always stress that with especially like treasurer's reports, that we
Yes.
definitely do not want to adopt a treasurer's report because yeah, we're saying that all the money statements are true, and we do not know that for a fact unless we've actually seen all the statements from the bank. That's why there's things like audit committees and accountants. Our last paragraph of the minutes, the time the meeting was adjourned, signed by the secretary. The term respectfully submitted or anything else like that is not necessarily, that's kind of an outdated term, just your name. And after the minutes are approved, write approved, followed by the secretary's initials and the date approved. Usually what a lot of secretaries like to do is put like a watermark across the minutes when they're still in draft that say draft. So when you send them out, that members are clear that these have not been approved yet and that it is a draft and it is not an official record until they're approved. Keep losing my pointer. So as I said a couple slides ago, for tips for some good minutes, we write what was done, not what was said. We don't have to get into the whole conversation around a motion. And again, I do know there are some organizations that do some verbatim type things, but for most regular organizations, we're not going to put what every member said about a motion, because really the minutes are about business. They're not necessarily about opinions and the whole conversation behind what was done, especially as a board and as a fiduciary of a board. Once a motion is passed, you have the duty of loyalty to back what your organization adopted.
Come in.
Sorry?
Beg your pardon?
Oh, I think,
Apologize.
no. Because yeah, once a motion is adopted, you know, as a board member, you would stand with what the board adopted, whether or not you agreed with it in the beginning or not. So you definitely would not want all the conversation in there about who was in favor of a motion, who was not in favor of a motion, what they said about a motion, because that could cause some issues, and of course it lacks unity within your board. And write your minutes as soon as possible after the meeting, because of course our memories of what happened tend to fail us. I actually usually like to take the agenda for the meeting beforehand, and I make like skeleton minutes. So as the meeting's going on, I can just type in there and fill it in, especially if I know motions that are gonna come up and things like that. I can at least put what the motion started out as and amend it as we go. And really, most of the time, I can send out minutes or draft minutes a few minutes after we're done with a meeting, because I do want to be fresh and I do want to make sure that everything's clear. If I wait a week or two afterwards, you know, I can write things down, and my chicken scratch handwriting doesn't necessarily come through clear later, because I don't really remember what I wrote sometimes, and I can't always read what I wrote. So it's good just to get them done and get them out there. And as I said, they're not a narrative. So if you are going to write anything, you want very brief paragraphs. A guest speaker, if we have a guest speaker, you would put their name and their subject, but you don't need to put a whole long summary of their speech. You can put a couple lines about it, but it doesn't have to be a paragraph long. My comment about that is, if you're having a guest and your members really wanted to know what the guest was saying, they should attend the meeting. Recording votes. So of course, as I said earlier, you want to record whether a motion was adopted or defeated. Plus there's other things you can do, such as refer a motion or postpone a motion, things like that. If there's a counted vote, you would put, you know, by a vote of, and the count that the motion was adopted, or the count and that it was defeated. If a vote's requiring a 2/3 vote, the motion was adopted by a 2/3 vote. And I also like to say too, about the majority. I mean, adopted or defeated, if it's a majority, you don't have to put a majority vote, but I always see and hear the term simple majority. A majority is a majority. You don't have to put the word simple in front of it. If you're recording
Excuse me, so Christina, if it's a 2/3 vote, then you do not put the actual vote, but you do if it's a majority vote?
No, you would just, if it's a majority, you would just put whether it was adopted or defeated. So if you're just
But-
putting them,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
So
if you want to put the term it was adopted by a majority vote, you can, but usually if it requires a majority and your minutes say adopted, it's usually assumed that it was adopted by a majority vote.
But if it's a counted vote requiring a 2/3, you would put in the count the same way
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, if it's a required vote, whatever the requirement is, yeah, you would put the number of votes cast for and against, and then you would put that 2/3 vote or majority vote, or some organizations have different thresholds for votes too. Of course, we know that majority and 2/3 are the most common, but sometimes there's other special rules adopted for a different. But yeah, if it's a counted vote and there's a certain threshold for it, you would write down what the threshold was to achieve an adopted vote.
Question.
Mhm.
If it's by unanimous consent, you put that in the minutes, unanimous consent.
You can just put it was adopted, but you can, I mean, if it's what you would like to do, you can put it was adopted by unanimous consent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because either one, adopted or adopted by unanimous consent, you're gonna have the same results. Some of those depend on the style of the organization too, and the custom of the organization, what they usually have in minutes. I know different organizations, even though Roberts has kind of a layout for how minutes are written, some organizations like to write their minutes a certain way. So usually you go with the custom of your organization too, if that's your wish. But Roberts does have a layout for it. If you're having a ballot vote, which obviously a lot of times that's when you're voting for officers, but it could be other things, referendums, things like that. You would put first the number of votes cast for a certain position or a certain motion, the number of votes necessary for the election or adoption. So something like if it's a majority and you have 30 votes cast, then you would put, 30 votes cast, 16 votes necessary for election or adoption, the number of votes each candidate or side received, and if there were any illegal votes, you would also put that. And that's the type of thing too, if you have a tellers committee, that's the exact thing that they would write down for each position as well, that the chairman would then read off as the result of the election. And then of course.
The number of illegal votes, is that part of your 30 votes? Or if you had
If-
4 illegal votes, would you have said 34 votes cast?
No, it would be included in the total number cast. So yeah, whatever the number of votes cast, the number for like each side and the illegal votes should all end up to 30. So if you had 30 votes cast between whatever the candidates received and the number of illegal votes, that would add up to 30. Yes.
Anna has a question.
Okay, Anna.
Hi. Following up on Penelope's comment, you have number of votes cast, and let's say 34, 4 were illegal. Then the second point, that number necessary for adoption, will it be calculated from what number? From the number of corrected votes or the total votes cast?
The total votes cast, whether they were illegal or not. Yes. Yep. So if you had 34 votes cast, even if 4 of them were illegal, it would be 18 for election. Correct. Because sometimes people may not necessarily want to vote for either side, and instead of abstaining, they just vote for a cartoon character or something like that for some reason.
And that would include a blank ballot as well, or?
A blank ballot would not be a vote cast. So if you think about, like, sometimes you have multiple, like in the case of voting for officers, you might have multiple officers to vote for. Say there's 4 officer positions to vote for. So you would take each one individually, say some people didn't vote for vice president or some people didn't vote for secretary. For each office that was voted on, say 34 votes were cast for president, you would base it on that. Say only 32 votes were cast for vice president, you would base your votes necessary based on how each position or the number of votes that were cast for each position, which is
So
interesting.
in order to be illegal, it must have some writing on it or
Margin.
some indication of a vote. Is that
Yeah,
what I'm hearing?
So abstaining doesn't count either way. It doesn't count for or against in most cases, unless it's a vote by rules where the vote is based on the number of members or the number of members present, which the majority of votes are usually based on the number of votes cast. So of course, that's another thing where you would need to look in your rules and see if it just says a majority or if it says a majority of the entire membership or a majority of the members present, something like that too. So that's where you start getting into what is it based on. But for the most part, it's based on the number of votes cast, not the number of people there. Because yeah, that's actually interesting. You guys were asking me about being a dental hygienist. I actually served as our Speaker of the House for a few years. So I got to oversee the elections, and there was a year that people didn't necessarily love the candidate for vice president, but there was no other candidate put forward. And so a lot of members seem to think, we have 150 delegates usually, a lot of people seem to think if less than 75 members cast a vote, that it would not be a legal election and that they would have to come up with more candidates to revote. And of course, I said, that's not true. If there are any votes at all cast for a position, it is a legal election, and say 3 people cast a vote and 2 people voted for this person, he would be elected because it's based on the number of votes. So yeah, we do have to keep that in mind because sometimes people don't quite understand that. If your bylaws or your rules say it's based on the, you know, a majority to elect, and it doesn't say a majority of the entire membership. So we do, like I said, have to keep that in mind.
Anna has put an interesting comment in the chat. I don't know if you're seeing it.
I
We are
can-
making it harder for members to cast illegal votes using electronic voting systems.
Okay, interesting.
Do you have any experience with that or comments?
Actually, it's interesting you say that. When I was Speaker of the House of the Hygiene Association, my first year was 2019. We used to have an in-person House of Delegates. And then, of course, 2020 came around, and we were unable to have an in-person House of Delegates. So I served as Speaker of the House for 4 years. So we have went electronic now. So yeah, 2020, 21, 22, my other 3 years I served, we did do, we used Election Buddy, and I believe NAP started using Election Buddy too these last couple of years. And so, yeah, you're right. It does make it hard. It makes it almost impossible to cast an illegal vote, because you either vote for one of the candidates, or Election Buddy, I believe, just gives you the option of other. So you don't actually even write anybody in at that point. You just mark other, or you don't vote at all. And so with that, if enough other people cast a vote for other, where it made somebody who wasn't already running get the majority, that is when you would have to start taking additional nominations and figure out who these other people were to have an election to get a majority. But yeah, I think at least with Election Buddy, there's no option to write in Mickey Mouse or anything like that. So that's a good point, for sure.
Do any of the rest of you online, have you had a similar experience or a comment about that? I just think this is increasingly, and I know it has nothing directly to do with minutes, but.
No, it's great conversation though. Case
And
got her
it
hand
looks
up.
like Kay has a comment.
Yep. I am an election buddy coordinator for NAP and other organizations as well. When I have to suggest something, that's my system of choice. And they will allow you to have write-in votes where you
Oh, they
can
do.
actually type in the specific names. That's one of the reasons why I like it. And I will point out that it is only harder for members to cast illegal votes if it's been set up correctly. Like with any other technology, you got to use it right to make it work the way you want it to. And so any of these systems, if they're set up incorrectly to allow you to cast 6 votes when you're only supposed to be able to cast 4, you can have illegal votes and you may not recognize that you do. It makes it harder in many ways to identify those illegal votes, for sure.
Yeah, that's true, because that's what I was gonna say. Only like our delegates receive a link to be able to vote. And so we know how many people have been sent out a link. So we shouldn't get more votes than that, for sure. Because I know people would have concern about, well, how do we know that the people who are supposed to be voting are voting? It's like, well, 150 people received a link, and those are the only people that should be voting. Now, if they sent their link to somebody else and let somebody else vote for them, I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, and I like the system. I don't know who else is. I know Kay is very, very familiar with NAP. I see her face up there every time I'm at biannual convention. But I know, yeah, NAP, we used to have the little clickers to vote with, and I definitely think Election Buddy has been a big improvement. It does take a little practice at the beginning with getting your link set up and everything on your electronic device, but and I know we've used a couple other ones in ADHA, and maybe it was a different one we used that didn't allow for write-in votes, but you have to be careful too with that, because we had a system that we were voting on a Sunday and the system went down. So that's another challenge with electronic voting too. And we tried to call the company to figure out what was happening. And their response was pretty much like, why are you at a meeting on a Sunday voting? We don't have technical support on Sunday. So you have to be very careful when you're choosing a company to do your voting as well, that you do have that support. So yeah, we resorted to hand raising in Zoom, which was fun because then of course we had members on that weren't delegates, and luckily our delegates have to be, it has to say on their Zoom name that they're a delegate. So it took a little bit of time to go through and make sure that everybody who had a hand raised was indeed supposed to vote as well. So there are some challenges with electronic voting, but I think it's definitely a big improvement over paper balloting, whether your meeting's in person or not. So yeah, I know, like I said, Penelope, it's not part of minutes, but it's a good conversation to have. It's part of meetings. So yeah. Roll call votes. If you're in an organization that requires roll call votes, especially a lot of public servants. I do stuff for a park district, their constituents have to know how they voted. So you would record the names on each side in favor or against, record names of those answering present, because some people don't vote for an issue at all. They just say they're present. So it's kind of the same thing as abstaining. And sometimes people say nothing, but the secretary does need to record enough names to show that a quorum was present when the vote was taken. Abstentions, you usually don't need to record abstentions, again, unless it's a public body or something like that, or you have rules that say that you must record abstentions, or you must record how each person voted. But, just as in the case of casting votes for, elections, you don't record those abstentions because they're not votes and they don't express an opinion at all. And then the chair should not call for abstentions when taking a vote. I know you hear that at meetings where people will say all of those in favor, all of those against, abstentions. Well, if they didn't vote for it or against it, they're not voting at all. So you don't need to take that vote for abstentions.
So Christina, going back one slide, when you said some people merely say present, that's because you need to record that the total in column A and column B plus the presence equal to quorum?
Yes.
But
Yep.
they do not count in the total votes cast, right?
They don't, unless, it's the same thing. It depends on your rules, if it's a majority or if it's a majority of those present. So,
Okay.
which in that case, if you're answering present and it's a majority of those present, then not voting at all is like voting against something. So that's why members need to be aware of what their rules are. Yeah, thanks for that question, because yeah, that's definitely, sometimes people are like, I just won't vote for it, but it depends on what your rules say. So you have to be careful with that, because you might actually be voting against something by not voting at all. But usually, like I said, abstentions don't count. Most rules, and of course, if you're going by Roberts, it's based on the number of votes cast. Reading of our minutes. So they can be read at the next meeting, but now in this day and age of email and electronic, websites and things like that, if they're distributed ahead of time, they don't need to be read if there's no objection. The chair would ask for corrections. So once the minutes are presented, the chair would ask, are there any corrections to the minutes? The chair does not have to ask, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Because you have to adopt the minutes. Those are the official record of your organization. So all the chair would ask is, are there corrections to the minutes? And that's of course not, that's part of presiding, not part of minutes, but I like to point that out. So if there are corrections that are being made, oh, Myra, you have your hand up. Hi, Myra.
Hi. So how would it be recorded that the minutes were approved?
So I think we're getting to that next one, but I'll say it right now.
Okay.
So yeah, you would get to your minutes approval and you would say the minutes were approved as presented, as corrected, as read. You don't have to put down that there's a motion. You assume that there's a motion to adopt the minutes because you have to adopt the minutes. So yeah, you don't need to put in your minutes, a motion was made to adopt the minutes.
So when I get to that point, Christina,
Mhm.
and I'm presiding, what do I say? I'm not clear on that. How do I proceed further with that? I'm so
Okay.
used to saying, a motion to,
Right.
or if there's no objections, the minutes will stand as distributed.
Yeah. So, you know, the correct way, you should ask for corrections when you get to the minutes. So then, you know, the next item on the agenda is minutes or adoption of the minutes. Are there any correction to the minutes? And then, so we'll, oop, I went the wrong way. Hold on, I keep losing my pointer. So you would ask if there were any correction for the minutes. And so at this point, the chair has asked for corrections. So people would make their corrections. The secretary would record those in the text of the minutes that were being approved. So as somebody is recognized by the chair and they say, you know, my last name spelled wrong, or I wasn't at that meeting, or, you know, something like that. So those corrections would be made. And after all the corrections were made, the chairman would say, if there are no further corrections, the minutes are approved or the minutes are adopted. If there are no corrections, if the chair asks, are there any correction to the minutes, and nobody says anything, if there are no corrections to the minutes are approved or the minutes are adopted.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
No question.
Yes.
The secretary will mark all these things on her hard copy. Now to send it to the member, would you just scan that up with in that form and then send it rather than try to retype it and make it look neat on the corrections?
I think that's on my next slide, but yes, after you've made, now that we don't usually write them in ink anymore, it is perfectly acceptable to type the minutes. So they're all clean with no corrections or anything into it. Because like I said, when you send out those draft minutes, they should say that they're draft minutes. And at that point, they're only the secretary's notes. They're not the official record of the organization. So once everything's corrected, the secretary can clean them up and make them neat and readable and that. And then when you send them out, it would have the secretary's initials and the date approved at the bottom of it. So at that point, members know that those are the official records of the organization as they were approved at the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's much easier to read nice, clean minutes instead of trying to read underlines and crossouts or notes in the side, or like, yeah, if you're doing, I don't know how many people still do paper minutes anymore, but I'm sure most of it's electronic at this point. But yeah, it probably at one time it was probably a lot of work to try to retype all the minutes if you were typing them on a typewriter and that like we used to do. But now with a computer, you can just correct it, and a lot of times even programs, you can track changes and then accept all the changes and it'll just clean it up for you anyways. So yeah, you would want to send out a clean copy.
Christina, are you going to talk about minutes committees?
I can't remember if I have that.
We're hearing, we've heard some recommendations.
Okay, let me see if I have it in these slides. I can't.
Okay.
I've done so many.
I'll just say, if you don't, maybe we could bring that
We can have a
topic up.
conversation about it. Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure there's people in this group that probably have some good tips on minute review committees. So when,
I
yeah,
have
because
a
they said
question.
when, yes,
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I wasn't sure when
no,
you were
go ahead,
finished.
Eva.
Yes, what I was wondering about is the corrections. Now, if there was a correction on the minutes and it was corrected during the meeting, when do you send the corrections?
As soon as the secretary has made the corrections, I mean, they're approved at that meeting. So realistically, she could probably send them by the time the meeting's over.
So I'm just kind of curious. So are these corrected minutes accepted again? Because
No.
there could have been a correction that wasn't exact,
Well,
made
so,
the proper way.
well, corrections can be made even after they are approved. Corrections can be made on minutes forever. You could go look at minutes from 20 years ago and make a correction on them. So yeah, they can always be corrected again. And then you would just put another date about when they were corrected.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the important thing would be to make the correction date change then. Like they
Yes.
were corrected on such and such a date, and that would be,
And if somebody made additional corrections, I would just add another date after them. I wouldn't remove the original date, but I would just, I've never gotten that question before, so. But yeah, Robert says that corrections can be made for eternity. I mean, if anybody ever wanted to go back and make a correction to minutes, even after they're approved, they can still be made.
Okay, so I'm getting, it's making me ask more questions because
That's okay.
I'm kind of curious. So if the correction was made, do
Mhm.
you note the correction that was made? Because if you're writing it, you probably cross out what was corrected and then make the corrections, let's say underneath or beside it, at the correction. But if you're doing it electronically, you take out what was incorrect, put the correct item in, but then the members may not know what was actually corrected.
That's true, but usually if it's made way after, I mean, but yeah, you would just send them out and say, you know, further corrections were made because those are the official records, and members probably still have the copy of what was originally there. So if they really wanted to, they could compare records too. I mean, instead of sending out a copy with crossouts and lines and things like me myself, I prefer a nice, clean, approved copy.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Yeah,
Yep.
that's great. Thank you.
Yep. Doris,
Doris?
you have your hand up?
You're still muted, Doris.
If you have corrections for the minutes, you're going to be correcting something that was previously adopted. When do you do that? What part of your meeting do you do that?
So are you asking about the initial minutes or
They-
if they had already been corrected
If
or
they
they had
had
already been adopted and then in
had
another?
they had already been adopted. Mhm.
Okay, so gosh, that's a good question. Somebody probably knows. I cannot tell you the answer of that confidently. I would say if it was something under new business. I don't know, does somebody have better knowledge of that? I knew Kay would have the answer for me. Kay and Tan
Yeah,
both.
yeah. Cindy, oh, Tan's got her hand up. Hear from Tan first.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understood the question clearly. Doris, what you're asking. So if there are corrections and the minutes have already been adopted, and we're talking about going back and making another correction, like if we're going back to February to make a correction, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So those February minutes were already corrected. I'm sorry, already adopted.
Mhm.
So in March, we find that there's a mistake.
So you're asking where we would do that in the agenda. Right, Doris? Yeah, yeah. And I don't have a great answer for that, so I appreciate that we have other PRPs on here that can help us out.
Right. Now, I don't think I've ever had that experience either, because that's the sounds like the same time when and I think when you're adopting the current minutes, you adopt those and probably also make a note that you want to adopt, you want to make a correction to the previous month's meeting, that there was a correction that needs to be made there when you look in the
Under minutes approval.
Now, Kate, would you agree, or was that something different that you was gonna say?
I think you can do it in one of several places, Tan.
Okay.
I think that you could certainly make a motion while the minutes were pending. Yeah, after you had approved the last minutes, the last meeting's minutes, you could make a motion to amend the previous ones. It may be that it's something like if it's under the report of the membership committee and you want to correct it then, I think you could do it while that committee was reporting. Or I believe that it could come up under new business. So I don't think that there's a wrong time to bring it up unless it's just completely ungermane to the topic at hand.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
And I
Christine.
see that
Yeah,
someone
SAA.
else's hand is up.
Yeah, yeah. So SAA.
Yes, that's correct. I agree. And I mean, it can be brought up any time. And I mean, even during the minute session, someone could make a motion to correct because they notice something and they bring it up. But of course, just like anything that's previously adopted, it has to be a 2/3 majority, which it should get it in. No one's going to complain. But also comment, sometimes they say it's long time, even a year, you can correct it. Mostly, if it's a year, the only correction someone might make is a typo or spelling in somebody's name, because people have forgotten everything already.
Right.
Yeah, so.
But Roberts does say they can be made at any time, even years after they're corrected. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, who's gonna remember by then? But that's Roberts. Let's see, we have a chat.
And you have Doris with
Oh,
it.
Sergeant at Arms. I'm sorry, Penelope. Okay, AJ. Okay, I got it now. Thanks for the clarification on the SAA. Doris?
Yeah, the situation is I was going through minutes when I first joined my main group, my basic unit. And as I was going through them, I was noticing that January and February minutes, they had the wrong year on them
Mm-hmm.
and they need corrections. So I just pulled them all together, all the ones that had the wrong dates. And I was just waiting for a meeting, and I was just going to take new business time and go through the dates of those minutes. And all they would have to do was just change it and make it the correct year. But sometimes people forget to change the year
Right.
when they go into the new year. So that was just my point.
Okay. So yeah, like Kay and Tan were talking about, during either minutes approval or during new business, or as Kay said, depending on what it is, there probably isn't a wrong time to do it unless it's just completely out of left field. So all right. So yeah, with correcting minutes, a lot of this, it's in Roberts, but yeah, it's more like if you were writing minutes, making corrections in ink. Of course, now we have computers, so we make them on the computer. But if you had it on paper, making corrections in ink in the margin with a line around or through the item corrected, which of course, if you're doing it electronically, you can put a red line through whatever you're taking out and underline what's being inserted instead, type thing. Initialing each correction if it was a paper, or even if you're sending out corrected minutes with all your cross throughs and underlines, and then you could put your initials next to them. If there's a large amount of corrections to be made, you can attach an appendix to explain the large number of corrections that were made. But yeah, I think a lot of times on minutes, I know at least in my experience as a secretary, like Doris pointed out, sometimes you might have a wrong year. A lot of times I think it's just misspellings or a number was typed wrong, something like that. So a lot of times they're minor, but they can be major too. And if you're going to have a lot of corrections, then you could attach an appendix to show what all the corrections were that were made. And find my pointer again. There it is. So, and then, like I said, you would note in your minutes, when you're writing the minutes, under the subject of minutes approval, the minutes were approved as read or as corrected or as distributed if they weren't read. And like I said, the minutes can be retyped after your corrections were made. And then, corrections can be made at any time, even after the minutes are approval. So see, you guys were on the ball. You got all of this stuff before we got to this slide. And then once the corrections are made, the chair would declare the minutes approved. And until the minutes are approved, like I said, they're just the secretary's record. They're not the official record of the organization. Once they're approved, signed, and dated, they do become the official record and a legal document of the organization. Oh, here you go, Penelope. Approval by a committee. I do have that slide. So if there's more than a quarterly time between meetings, minutes can be approved by the executive committee. Even if there's not more than a quarterly time between, many organizations do have a committee that's appointed for such a purpose. I've been in organizations where a committee has been appointed at, either the annual meeting for the next year, or sometimes I've been in organizations where, depending on what members are present at a meeting, because not all members are always present, a committee has been appointed for that particular meeting to review the minutes. Like I said, I was Speaker of the House for the Hygiene Association. We have a minutes approval committee because, of course, there's a whole year in between meetings. So there is a minutes approval committee that reviews the minutes. approves them, and then they're submitted to the board. The board reviews them, and then they go to the membership. And when you're having minutes presented, they can have certain parts read for information. As I said, if they were distributed ahead of time, all the minutes don't have to be read unless somebody asked for them to be read, or if they ask for certain parts of the minutes to be read, just for clarification. Eva.
Yes, thank you. Just, I'm just stepping back to the last slide. I'm just wondering about the date. What date should be put on the minutes? Is the date that it was sent out to the membership as you know, the minutes that were sent out, or is it the date that it was actually approved during the meeting?
The minute that, or the date that the minutes were approved. So yeah, if you had a meeting today and you had minutes to approve, you would put, yeah, March 5th. I think today's the 15th, yeah, March 16th, 2025. So yeah, you would put the date that they were actually approved, not the date. Because when they're sent out, they're still the secretary's notes. They're not the official record until you're at the meeting that they were approved at. So you would put the date that they were approved.
So you send the date that they were sent out on
The
the
date
date
that
that
they
they were
were
sent out, and then when they were approved, you change the date?
Well, yeah, you don't have to put a date at all on the minutes before they're approved. So
I see.
when the secretary sends out the draft minutes, it'll have the date that the meeting took place, of course, within the body of the minutes. But until they're approved, there's no date at the bottom of them. You would only
I
put a
see.
date at the bottom once they're approved. So yeah, whatever meeting they were approved at, that would be that date.
Great, all the little tidbits, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you
And Chris-
guys have good questions, because some of these questions, I've done this presentation several times and a lot of these questions have never came up. So you guys got your thinking caps on.
I'm going to attack your next slide here because I had a couple
The
questions on
committee
that.
ones, okay.
Yeah.
And I
Okay,
may need
so-
some assistance with these too, because I haven't done a lot with committees, so
Okay,
with
so-
approval of minutes.
So let's say that a committee had been appointed to review the minutes, and the committee had reviewed them. It sounded like you said that then before they go to the membership, the committee would report to the executive committee?
Well, that's an organization I'm in.
Oh,
That's-
okay.
That's the process. Usually, if
But-
you have a committee that is appointed for approving the minutes, I'm sorry, I should have left that out. Yeah, if a committee is appointed to approve the minutes, they approve the minutes, and then once they're approved, then those minutes would go out to the membership with the date on them that the committee approved them.
But don't they still have to be voted on by the, in other words, I thought that the committee's review of the minutes was so that the minutes could then be sent to the membership as a whole before the next meeting at which they were going to be approved.
I guess it's a difference of if you have a committee, a minutes review committee or a minutes approval committee too. So some organizations have a minutes approval committee, so the committee does approve those minutes. But yeah, if you had a minutes review committee, then yeah, those would go to wherever they needed to go, whether it was to the membership for adoption, or yeah, in our case, where they went to the board and then they went to the membership they went to the board for approval and then to membership. It depends on your rules too. So it depends on that's a good point, Penelope. Yeah, it depends on if you have, this is approval by a committee. So if you have a committee that approves the minutes, then those wouldn't need to be adopted again. They've already been approved by that committee, and then they would go out to the membership that they were approved. Now, of course, if there was corrections that needed to be made, somebody could still make corrections to the minutes. But
Yeah,
you don't have to ask for approval at the next meeting because they would already be approved.
I think, and people correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in general at our Toastmasters that usually usually it is a minutes review committee.
Okay.
And
yeah.
then, and it's usually for our district conferences. And those are the minutes that are then sent to the members so that they're going to be less time spent with making.
Right. So yeah, at
corrections,
that point,
but
yeah,
that
if
they
you have
are-
minutes review, yeah, then they would
Yeah,
go to your
and that then they
membership
are
for
brought
adoption.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think, and I don't know, Rick may have more information on this than I do, but I believe that we're required to present the minutes to the membership as a whole at the next district council or district executive committee meeting, even if they've been reviewed by a committee.
I agree with you, Penelope.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one of those things where, yeah, you always have to read your own rules to see what your rules say.
But I do think that I never even knew that there was such a thing as a minutes review committee, and I have been thrilled and strongly urging people to take advantage of this wonderful, wonderful new invention.
Yeah, it is nice, especially if you have a larger organization, that you would have many members attending a meeting, that you would have this review committee, because then of course your review committee is probably going to meet shortly after your meeting as well. And
Yeah.
like I said, our memories are a lot better, in shorter time increments than they are longer. So especially quarterly meetings, 3 months later, you might not remember exactly what happened. So yeah.
So what Kay is referring to is that if it's a minutes approval committee, the date that the last approval sent their
Yeah. Yeah.
approval would be the date on the minutes, but so it's good to know for different organizations.
Yeah, because I've been in organizations that, yeah, you're right, Kay, yeah, there's a minutes approval committee, and sometimes it's done electronically too, where people review them, make their corrections, and then they go out, and then once everything's corrected and everybody agrees, yeah, then you would get that approval from each member. So yeah, that's a good point. So
We may actually one day let you go on with the next slide.
no, that's okay. That's great. I like it when there's a lot of conversation and questions and that, because, as I always say, as a parliamentarian, I don't necessarily know all the answers all the time, and I actually learn. I always like being in meetings too, where there are other parliamentarians, because of course we learn from each other. And it's good to talk about these things, and for other people to have this information and be able to share it with other people as well. I mean, that's our whole, mission as NAP members, is, to educate people. So that's good. And you get, everybody's getting educated by asking the questions they want to know as well, because I don't know everything that you're going to want to know either. So no, that's great. We have these questions. So preserving our minutes, you're going to store them in a bound journal, computer storage, scanned, CD-ROM, if anybody uses that anymore, USB, whatever. And then it is recommended to have each year's minutes printed and permanently bound in some fashion, which I thought was, go ahead.
Wow, I said.
Wow. I know. And I thought that was really interesting, because I was like, wow, do organizations actually do this? Because I know every organization I've been in, we print them up off the computer, we get our 3-hole punch, and we put them in a notebook. But there are some organizations that, for historical references, they do get them bound. And actually, I said I was presenting at a park district conference, and they actually said they went back because things like parks and that get renamed, or, something historical, where it's like, what was this park originally, and when did it become that park, and what year was it, and what changed? And they actually go back and looked through their printed journals to find some of these answers, because not all these things are on computers if you have, 50, 100-year organizations, and not everything has been scanned onto the computer for every organization either. So I actually had said this. I was like, I don't know who has these permanently bound. And like, I bet a dozen hands went up, and they're like, oh yeah, we have them permanently bound. So that was interesting to me too. So just a short example of minutes. So your first paragraph, your regular monthly meeting of the ABC Society was called to order on Monday, October 23rd, 2017 at 8:30 a.m. At the Society's building, with the president and the secretary being present. The minutes of the July 16th, 2017 meeting were read and approved as corrected. So that's all you need in your first paragraph. Very simple.
So you don't list who's present?
It depends on the rules of your organization and the customs of your organization. Some organizations, your rules require you to list who's present. Some organizations, it's a custom of your organization to list who's present. So that would depend on the practices of your organization.
And you never list their names?
I was going to say,
president and secretary.
Yeah, it just depends too, because me, as my custom, and the organizations I'm in, we do put the president and the secretary's name, but we don't list every member that was there.
If
So
you
it-
work with an Open Meetings
Yes.
Act group, so a school board
Oh,
or
yeah,
a
you
city
definitely have
council
to. Yeah,
or whatever, you may have statutory
yeah,
requirements
yeah.
to put the names of the
Right.
elected
In
officials that are
Illinois,
present.
yeah, because the Illinois Park Association of Park Districts, they're bound by the Open Meeting Act, and yeah, we had talked about that because I added slides when I've done this about the Open Meeting Act, and yeah, it's definitely required because they're responsible to their constituents, and their constituents want to know that it's required that they attended the meeting. So you're right, Kay. Yeah, so that's why I said it always depends on the rules and the practices of your organizations. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I know, I always love that. I'm sure as long as you've been a parliamentarian, Kay, people always ask you, what does Robert say? And I said, well, what do your rules say? What do your laws say? Because of course we know there's the hierarchy of laws, and, you know, federal, state, and local laws definitely rank higher than Robert's rules. And then officers report, this is a treasurer's report. You can either have detailed reports or you can attach the treasurer's report, but something as simple as the treasurer reported the receipt of a bill from the 123 Corporation in the amount of $1,000 for the printing of new pamphlets promoting the organization. The question was put by the chair that the bill be paid was adopted, or you could put a motion that the bill be paid was adopted, same thing. A lot of times the treasurer's report, which that's a whole separate presentation, would, you know, sometimes it will put your beginning balance, your receipts, your expenditures, and, you know, what your balance is at the end of a month or a quarter of that. But the treasurer often submits a report, and you can attach it. And like Kay said earlier, they're for reference. They're not the official record of the organization. You don't approve that report. Committee report, Mr. Jones reporting on behalf of the convention committee, move that the annual meeting be held at the downtown hotel. The motion was adopted. Or if it's a report where there were no recommendations, the report of the membership committee was received and placed on file. That's all you have to put. You don't have to put anything else about what was in the report. Special committee, very similar to regular committees, but you would just write down that the member was reporting for the special committee. This committee was appointed to investigate and report on the cost of hiring a new accountant. Recommended adoption of the following resolution. Resolved that the ABC Corporation hire Two Hands accounting firm to review the accounts and assist with filing taxes annually. The resolution was adopted. And of course, this isn't part of minutes, but if a special committee is appointed, once their job is done, they are discharged and they are no longer a committee.
But that's not included.
No,
Because
because once they're done, it's assumed that their job is done. They don't have anything else to do, so they don't exist anymore.
And this is a resolution instead of a motion?
You can put motion or resolution, either one. Those are kind of interchangeable. I mean, there are organizations that have resolutions committees, but resolutions are motions.
I'm always nervous when it's two different words that are interchangeable. That's
Yeah,
all.
I mean, just like adopted and approved, they mean the same thing. Oh, believe me, I belong to an organization that loves to wordsmith, and yeah, it's yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes you get so hung up on two words. Do they mean the same thing, or is one stronger than the other, or are they different? So yeah, I get it. Anna?
And Anna, yeah.
I have a question about about any reports of committee or officer reports. If there is no motion that was made from the reports, how do we capture these reports in the meeting?
So just in the minutes, like this line, it would just say the report of the membership committee was received and placed on file. Members do receive those reports if they're written reports. So like Kay said, you know, I put them behind the minutes, and Kay said that she, you know, specifically puts in there that they're for reference, that they're not adopted. Or sometimes committees and officers don't always put written reports in. Sometimes they may make a very brief verbal report. So you can put a couple of lines of their very brief verbal report they gave, but if they're giving a long detailed report, they really should have a written report on file ahead of time. If it's short and you can write a couple lines, that's fine. But if it's longer, they really need to submit a full report. I think I saw another hand go up. Nope. Nope, now I see it. Eva.
Oh,
It's kind of, yes, thank you. It's kind of related to to emotion and not. I have a question because for recording motions, and I was wondering, is there a place? I guess it's kind of a twofold because it can be revisited at any time when a motion is made and it can be changed. But is there a place where there's an index of motions that have been made by the organization? Like in Toastmasters, we have motions that are made, and sometimes you don't want to revisit the motion. You just want to mention that the motion has already been made to do certain things, but new members aren't aware of it. So you don't want to revisit and do all the discussions about it and debate about it because there was extensive debate. Maybe it's gone through committee or whatever to to make that motion and so that the club would abide by it and not just would be any
Right.
club. Is there
Right.
any index of certain motions that you can go back, let's say 2 or 3 years?
Right. So you mean instead of having to look through minutes and try to
Right.
find those motions. Yeah, and that's another thing that depends on the practice of the organization. That's not necessarily a Robert's Rules thing or that it's, but I am familiar with organizations that they do have an index for each year. They will put the list of motions that were adopted so that, yeah, if somebody new comes on the board, they can see, you know, what has been adopted within the organization. So that's, yeah, it sounds like you guys are already doing that. So that's your current practice.
No, no, it's not necessarily.
Oh.
I was just asking a question because sometimes with new people coming on board, they may not realize that there was certain things that have been
Right.
acted on before.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's a case too, where if there's somebody on the board that knows that, I mean, they can inform the new member that we already do that. That's already our practice type thing as well. And if you have those handy, you could look it up, or you could also offer to find the information for the person if they want to see the proof of it. But yeah, that's one of those I think case by case basis where you would need to decide what to do depending on what the situation was.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that Roberts gives like a real like an explanation for about what to do about what happened in the past. But that's why it's good to not have like a brand new board every year too, to have, you know, like people who roll off in certain intervals, at least in my opinion, you know, that there's always somebody on the board that was on the board before. So you do have some historical knowledge to a point.
you have two questions coming up, Barbara and then AJ.
Okay, Barbara.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment on what we were just talking about. What Eva said is very, very valuable tool. Roberts refers to them as your standing rules, and what they are they motions that were adopted that remain in effect until they're amended or rescinded. And if someone was to take the time to go through the minutes and create that list, they should be listed as a separate document from your bylaws. And you just call them standing rules. So like you said, you're not redoing things that were done already over and over and over again. And it does make it a lot easier when you have a new administration to come in and take over.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's really good.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, yeah, you have your standing rules, but you're right, those motions that were made, unless they were part of the standing rules, those motions aren't going to be, in your standing rules. They would need to be a separate document for sure. AJ?
Yes, I just had a comment. I volunteered to be a secretary of one organization, and I did volunteer to put all the motions from the whole year or previous and list them all out. It's not very much, but the organ doesn't like to do things. They also have a lot of suggestions, and I list up all the suggestions, but no one took it up, so we didn't do anything. But anyway, it's a dysfunctional, and this is one they have it's a parish annual meeting once a year, and I told them you have to have a minutes committee and prove it, because what they were doing is approving minutes every year. We've forgotten everything already. And that's why we need that, have a
Right.
minutes committee. And also one question is, there's a minutes I read that I'm supposed to do something and no one told me, and I didn't do it. That's why we never get anything done. My question is, in a minute, if a person supposed to do something, how do we make a highlight? Should we bold it? Hey, you're supposed to do something before the next
So
meeting.
you're meaning like if a motion was adopted for somebody to do something, how do we
Yeah,
make them
and
do that?
and
That's
no
a
one did
great
it.
question, AJ.
Thank you.
I guess maybe, you know, you don't want to micromanage people, but yeah, if there's deadlines for things, I mean, that may be up to the president to, you know, contact people and say, hey, you know, we got a meeting coming up, there's a deadline, you know, are you coming along with this? You know, what's happening? You know, if there's certain intervals they have to
Right.
report. But yeah, that's probably like a $25,000 question, AJ. How do you get people to do the things they're supposed to do? That's an awesome question, and I
Well, that's a
don't think I have an
administrative.
answer for you.
But on the minutes, would you say you highlight it or bold it? So then, hey, I read it, I'm supposed to do something and not skim over it and forgot
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Right.
I don't know that I would necessarily highlight it in the minutes, but yeah, I mean, maybe a reminder from the president or something, you know, a couple weeks before a meeting could, I mean, I know I belong to an organization where our president sends us lots of reminders about things. I have a board meeting Friday and, you know, here's a reminder. We have a board book we review ahead of time. Make sure you review your board book if you haven't reviewed your board book, you know, and we get several reminders, you know, just to kind of encourage us to do the things we're supposed to be doing. So Thursday night, we're not panicking and trying to accomplish things. So that probably has to do with, you know, being organized as an officer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
AJ, I'm secretary for my co-op buildings board of directors. And I actually do the minutes as the meeting is going on, so that within half an hour after the meeting, I'm sending out the minutes. But
Absolutely.
at the end of the minutes, I draw a line, and below the minutes, I put notices. And then I list, don't forget, managing agent, you promised to call the exterminator. Superintendent, you are supposed to do this, you know. So and then before the minutes are approved, we just strip that section
out.
out. But it goes out the same day with the minutes. And it doesn't always work, but at least I feel better.
If you put them separately.
Good
Yeah,
idea.
that
Yeah.
could work too. Yeah. Let's see. And then I think we had talked about if you have a guest speaker, you know, you don't have to put much in there, but you know, the president introduced the guest speaker, Mrs. Mayweather, whose subject was better meeting management. And you don't have to put a lot about what she spoke about or anything. You don't have to put a paragraph about what the guest speaker spoke about, just what the subject was. And then the last minute, very simple. The meeting was adjourned at 10:30 a.m. The secretary's name and title is usually what I put. So I think that is everything. So any further questions, comments, anything? No, looks like we got most of our questions answered during the meeting. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed meeting all of you. Some of you, I see a lot of familiar faces on here too. So I know a lot of my fellow NAP members, and Myra's even a fellow Illinois member of mine. Barbara's a New Mexico member and a fellow dental hygienist.
Okay. Well, Christina, thank you so much. I'm going to go around the room before I turn this back over to our president, just to get final comments. Who knows, maybe it'll shake a question out of a tree. You never can tell. And because we're Toastmasters, if anyone has any constructive comments for Christina as well,
Absolutely.
I'm sure, judging by how she's vigorously nodding her head,